Welcome to Becoming Spiritual, a podcast about the magic that surrounds us and has always been a part of us. I'm your host, Heather Dolan, a passionate seeker dedicated to bringing together beautiful humans who are doing amazing things in this world. Together, we will explore healing modalities and practical spiritual practices that can enrich your everyday life. We will also hear stories of awakenings, many from people in the corporate world who have broken out of the spiritual closet. Wherever you are in your journey, know you have found a community of open-hearted individuals committed to making themselves and our world a better place. Welcome home. Welcome back to Becoming Spiritual. Today, we are going to be diving into my story of my breast implant explant surgery. It's been a journey for me. And it's been something that's been on my heart. And I knew from when I started this podcast, I wanted to do this episode. And there was so much information that we had to put it into 2 episodes. So Natalie will share about that in a second, but I am in the interviewee seat today. Natalie does a beautiful job of bringing all of my experiences, my story, bringing it to the surface so that it can see the light, so that you all can hear it, because I felt that this was a really profound journey that I've been on over not only the past 7 months since my explant surgery, but really since I think I've gotten them as a woman, as someone who was seeking things outside of myself. And I'm very hopeful that this will reach a lot of other women who are feeling they need support right now, and they might not even know that they need support. So I hope this episode resonates with you and that you feel all of the love that Natalie and I put into this and sharing all the information we shared. So Natalie, do you want to share what we're going to be talking about across these 2 episodes?
Yeah, it's been a really important part of the broader mission of this podcast to empower people with information as they traverse their spiritual journey, their awakening journey. And I know this has been a huge, huge part of your journey, Heather, in returning home to yourself. So I really, really wanted to do your story justice, because I've also had such a strong belief about how much this could help people. And obviously there'll be lots of women who, if they're not going through this or have gone through this themselves, may know someone either in their family or their community or their workplace who might be experiencing something similar. And even if you're a male listener, this information is really powerful to understand, because you'll get an insight into the female psyche around body image and the pressures around that. But also you might learn some information that you might be able to share with a woman in your life, in your community, in your world. We've been able to take all the information shared and put it into 2 episodes. So we have a part 1, which is all about Heather's story, her journey from getting the implants to getting the explant surgery. And in part 2, we're going to be taking a really deep dive into the more practical information around breast implant illness, the risks around getting breast implants, the practical considerations around explant surgery. So we want to give you as much information as possible across Heather's story, and also that knowledge sharing to help you make informed and empowered decisions about your own health. And even if you haven't gone through this process yourself, we talk a lot about discernment and having the strength to advocate for yourself in a medical system that often we feel so disempowered, especially as women, when we're experiencing symptoms that the system might not deem real. So it's a super powerful journey. We're really excited to share this with you all. So thank you for coming along for the ride, and let's get into part 1. Welcome back to Becoming Spiritual, and I'm today's host, Natalie Grace. With me today is our special guest, Heather Dolan.
Hi, Natalie. So fun. We're flipping the script today, and I'm going to be the interviewee, and Natalie's in the driver's seat.
Yeah, it's going to be a really special episode today. So Heather, what are we here to talk about?
So we are going to be talking about my explant surgery that I had in January, which I know sometimes people are like, what the heck is that? But it's basically I had breast implants removed. And we are going to be talking about what that looked like for me. And while people might think, why is this part of becoming spiritual? We're going to dive into that because it actually is a spiritual conversation. And so we wanted to share it with you today.
Yeah, absolutely. I know this is probably, even for people who haven't gone through exactly what you've gone through with this journey to self-love and self-acceptance, these kinds of huge, big life milestones are such important and integral parts of our spiritual journey. So I'm sure as we go through unpacking your experience and your journey, there's going to be a lot of spiritual themes that are quite common to a lot of listeners, even if they haven't experienced what you've experienced. So I'm really excited to unpack this with you today. And I think this conversation is actually going to help a lot of people. And I know that's been part of your mission in sharing this on the podcast, right, Heather?
Yeah, for sure. The more I have conversations with women, even before I had the surgery, but now certainly since I've had the surgery, something that's been wanting to be birthed and come out is this story and sharing, because it's an incredibly important topic. And we'll go into some statistics, but it touches, I'm very comfortable in saying probably, if not 50, close probably to 75%, at least for those living in the US, women think about some type of augmentation to either their breasts or their body. And I don't feel like societally we've done a good job in giving correct information before women go down this route. And I think there's more of a systemic issue here. And I think that does come back to the spiritual piece, which again, we'll talk about. But I think it's really important to have this conversation and have our voices be amplified and realize that this conversation is really in a container of love and non-judgment. And also, we are not here to create fear either. So I think that's really important as you jump into this episode to know this is not a place to feel like we're telling you what to do. It's really education and also honoring my journey and my experience and wanting to share that in a safe place, but also have it go out to more people than I can talk to on a regular basis about it.
Yeah, because it's a pretty big deal to make the decision to go back to what you were before you decided to improve something. What led to your decision to remove the implants?
So my implants, as of January when I had the surgery, I'd had them for 15 years. So they weren't 15 years old, because they say the average shelf life, they tell you, which I think is one of the things no one really thinks about, is 10 years. And so when you're thinking about getting them, I can tell you that 10-year time frame, it doesn't matter. At least I can speak for myself. You're just thinking, okay, cool, 10 years is so far from now. I just want to look better now. I want more confidence now. I want larger breasts now. So who cares about 10 years? That's so far away. But if we actually think about it, it's like a countdown timer of, wait, in 10 years, I'm going to have to go through this thing again. And you don't really know what you're going through because you haven't been through it yet. And so for me, I did at the 10-year mark have to get my implants replaced. And that was because I was actually having pain. I was having a lot of pain on my left side. We didn't know what was going on. I reached out to my former plastic surgeon who did my original implants, and he sent me for, I guess it was an ultrasound, and they didn't see anything because he thought that there could be a rupture that might be causing the pain. And I had had pain on my left side. It'd been problematic pretty much since I got them. And come to find out, my surgeon had severed a nerve, which I knew because I had severe nerve pain on my left side. So right after my surgery, throughout my recovery, I kept saying I had a lot of numbness and pain. And he said, oh, it's fine. It'll be fine when you heal, because it's pretty much right away. I lost sensation on my left side. And so at the 10-year mark, I was having all this pain. And my surgeon had told me that sometimes an ultrasound doesn't show if you have a rupture. So I went for an MRI, also didn't show a rupture. And then my surgeon said, look, they can have ruptures and it doesn't show. So it's up to you. Obviously, you're having pain. You know, you might want to consider switching them out. You know, they kind of make it seem like you're going in for like an oil change or something. And then ended up telling me that my implants had been recalled. And so there was a recall on them for the higher risk of rupture, especially as the longer you had them in. And so I was literally just at the 10-year mark, like almost to the month. And so he said, look, they're offering free implants. You won't have to buy the implants this time. We'll swap them out. You'll just have to pay the surgical fee and, anesthesiologist and the surgical center fee. So I was like, great. And at the time, my husband had said, why don't you just get them out? And I mentally wasn't prepared. I had 2 small children in addition to my older daughter. It was 5 years ago. So I had a 5 and 7-year-old. I was still, really active with them, picking them up, especially my 5-year-old, and just playing. And the thought of having this longer recovery for a reconstruction. And also, to be honest, I was very intimidated at the thought of finding a surgeon to do the reconstruction. I was scared, really. I was very fearful. It felt like I had already had the breast surgery once, the implant. So it felt like that was the quickest way to get rid of the pain, to kind of fix this problem. I saw it as a problem and not have to really deal with it at the time. And it felt like emotionally, I was not ready to get rid of them and deal with the process of finding a surgeon to do like a reconstructive surgery, because I knew that it would be more in depth. It would be a more complex and, if anything, important surgery. And just mentally, I wasn't there. Emotionally, I wasn't there. I saw this as a problem, which was kind of my mindset at the time. It was 2019. It's a problem. I need to fix it. And this is the quickest way for me to fix it. So I kind of wasn't hearing anything or listening to myself. Meanwhile, my husband was saying this to me because I had had problems with them. I'd had this pain, so much so that I wasn't able to breastfeed either one of my children, which maybe we'll go into. But it also wasn't really in alignment on this health journey that I was on, where I was working out a lot. I had gotten my Peloton bike the year before. I was riding all the time, and I was already vegan for quite a long time, but I was really focused on my health and healing. And so for me, it really wasn't in alignment to kind of have these foreign objects in my body, but you couldn't tell me that. And I think my husband was kind of trying, he saw that and was like, why don't you just get them out? And I just, like I said, I just wasn't there yet. And so I replaced them. And I did ask the surgeon, because I was having all this numbness. And I said, can you just see if there's something when you go in there that maybe the nerve, if you could do something with it while I'm opened up? He said, sure, I'll take a look. So swapped out the implants. I had a very horrible recovery at the time. I started having blood pressure issues. My blood pressure was incredibly low, to the point, it was very difficult for me to even wake up. I was really sick, which I'd never really had problems. I've had multiple surgeries. I've had multiple knee surgeries because of injuries. I have also had, in full transparency, I had rhinoplasty. I had a deviated septum, but it was half that and then half cosmetic. So I had that done as well. And so I'd had multiple surgical experiences, and this by far was the worst. My husband was with me. And I was like incoherent. I didn't know what was going on. I was really sick. They kind of shoved some food my way. My blood pressure was really low. It was awful. It was the worst couple of hours of my life in the car on the way home. It was bad. And so I had this surgery. I got new implants. So I had those for 5 years. And pretty much as soon as I had them, from the moment I wasn't feeling well from a recovery perspective, right through to when I got them out, I knew it was a mistake. I knew it was a mistake to get them. I was regretful that I did it and that I didn't take the time to slow down and listen to my husband, to even listen to myself and what I really wanted. And I just really rushed into it. And so there's been this regret building up. There was a lot of regret that I got new ones. And my surgeon told me he didn't find anything in terms of the nerves. The pain that I was experiencing did go away. And I'm not sure what that was. I don't know if the implant had shifted. He really couldn't tell me. He was like, oh, we got in there. It wasn't ruptured. And so that wasn't the issue, but that pain went away. I did have some other pain, but it did relieve that. And so for me, it was this, I've kind of been living with this regret getting them done. And so it was time.
That's already such a really intense journey, because on the one hand, you've made a choice that sort of feels like in alignment, but then there's a deeper knowing and a deeper yearning that's even mirrored back to you from your husband that you don't need these. It's really interesting. There's so much to unpack, but let's fast forward a little bit. So you go through this process, it's about 5 years ago, and it comes to the point where something shifts with you, right? Where you're actually feeling a bit more ready to confront the fact that maybe you don't want these in your body anymore. Can you tell me what happened there? Was there any specific event or specific feeling in your body that you can pinpoint, or was it just kind of that resentment and more awareness?
Yeah, I think this is where the tether to the spiritual journey comes in, because I was listening to myself. I finally, I was doing so much healing work through my daily practices. I was listening to my body. I was listening to myself. I was working on who I was becoming as a person, as a soul, realizing that all those things that were the reasons that I got them, which we'll talk about, no longer existed for me.
Wow.
And so it felt very foreign to me at that point, where as I'm going through this journey, like I said, it was no longer in alignment for me, where I realized I don't need these. I don't want them. And all of a sudden, of course, when I made that decision, all of these things started flowing my way in terms of information, in terms of even how my surgeon came to me that I ended up having my surgery with. And for me, I know that it was divine timing. I had gone to someone who's become a friend for a hypnosis session. And one of my questions that I wanted to ask my higher self was, do I need to get my implants out? And the answer my higher self gave was, you are going to get them out. This is how you know if the answer is authentic, if it's coming from ego or from yourself. There was no alarm. There was no, you're in danger. You need to do this right now. Go book a surgeon when you get out of here. It wasn't that at all. It was, you are going to get them out. It's going to be easeful and you'll know when. And so it really anchored that seed of like, yeah, this is important and something that's coming, but I can decide on my time when that time is.
We're going to come back to the divine intervention of all of the information that started flowing your way, because I was privy to that coming to you and you starting to have these revelations about the risk, the potential harm, the other things that were happening with women that you were hearing the stories of. But you said something really important just then about those reasons that you initially got them weren't there anymore for you. So let's wind right back and talk about, when did this journey begin for you? How old were you? And what were those influencing factors? What were those reasons that made you want to do this in the first place?
Yeah. So I was, so I'm 48, 15 years ago, 33. So I was probably 32 when I probably finalized when I was getting it done. I was living in northern New Jersey outside of Manhattan, going into New York City a lot with friends for, parties and doing all the things you do, when you're younger. And I was married young, 23 or 24 for, 2 years. It was short. They call it your starter marriage. That's what I think the judge literally called it. And I, had some relationships after that. And I think I always was self-conscious about my breasts and my appearance. And I'm tiny on top. I always have been, kind of petite on top and then bigger on the bottom. I'm like the traditional pear-shaped woman. And so for me, I always felt really disproportionate. And then I'm also living in this place where appearance is important, where people are spending, to be honest, a lot of money they don't have for appearances, buying really expensive handbags and shoes and clothes, and just appearances is trying to come from a place with no judgment now, not judging myself or anyone else. It just feels like when you're in proximity to a major metropolitan area, especially one that's one of the largest cities in the world, like New York, it's very difficult to not notice everything around you, especially the women, and how well put together they are, and seeing all the beautiful clothes and bags and shoes, and you're constantly assaulted with billboards and walking down Madison Avenue and all the stores and all these things. And so I was around that all the time. And even honestly, driving around where I lived, it was Bergen County, New Jersey, the amount of billboards for plastic surgery,
wow.
There's a lot. There's a lot. There's a lot of plastic surgery centers. And so it almost became commonplace to see people getting plastic surgery, hear about people getting plastic surgery, maybe not to the extent of like in LA, out in California, where I'm sure it's much more common, but definitely in the area I was in, it was pretty common. And so for me, I felt like, it was a lot of subliminal messaging coming in over the years. And it was something that hit to a very big insecurity I had, I think, even as a teenager. I know looking at other people and seeing that I was this A cup size from a bra perspective, always thinking, oh, wait, I should look this way. When we see people in movies and TVs and those women that we might look up to who look different than us, that was something I always honed in on. And so for me, it was a journey too of how am I going to meet the right person to spend my life with? Not that I got that feedback ever from anyone, which is interesting. No one ever, made me feel bad about what I looked like, maybe the opposite, but I never believed it myself. And so for me, it was something very much internal. I didn't have a, traumatic situation where someone told me something terrible about myself and it stuck. I think it more was me honestly beating myself up and having this idea that I needed to somehow change my appearance. And given that, I've already shared, I also had my nose done as well. You can see how I was feeling. I needed to change my appearance. So it's kind of like moving into that early 30s chapter. I think I was like, gosh, I'm single and I want to be more confident. I mean, that's what it came down to, is I thought this is going to give me confidence. It won't be this thing that I'm insecure about. So having a lot of insecurity around that. And the other thing I'll say, at the time I had been at my same company for 10 years. We had an annual conference and it brought together the top like 30% of the sales force or whatever were recognized at this conference. And when we went, it was like a bit of a, I don't want to say fashion show, but I mean, packing for this trip was ridiculous. I mean, I'd have like 15 pairs of shoes for 5 days. It was ridiculous because we had business meetings. We had like fancy dinners, theme nights. We were going out every night. It was at places like Atlantis and in the Bahamas and a big resort in Hawaii. So it was very focused on appearance and kind of your outfits like we planned. And I remember it was like, we always knew who the women were from Orange County because they always were so put together. They were beautiful. They were just like perfectly primped and you knew who they were. And I remember I was like, oh, I want that. Like if I have that, I'm going to have this perfect life. And so that was a big influence. You're at these big fancy pools with everyone and in bathing suits. And I remember just feeling like, oh my gosh, I'm embarrassed of what I look like in a bathing suit, which makes me so sad for my younger self. I love you, younger self. But I think it was built up over time and it was this very slow drip of insecurity and then turning 30 and being single and thinking like, I want a family. I want to be married. I want all these things. And I don't think I thought like, oh, breast implants are going to make all these things magically appear. But for me, it felt like it was going to build my confidence. And I will say it absolutely did. When I got them, I felt incredibly confident in myself for a bit. It quote unquote fixed one thing. And then of course, then just made me focus my insecurities on something else. So it didn't in the end fix anything. It just allowed me to kind of check off on a box like, okay, I don't have to worry about having small boobs anymore. Great. Now I'll focus on all the other things. And so, yeah.
It's really interesting to hear you talk about being a bit more of a mature person. A lot of people are making these decisions so young now about their bodies, sometimes even before they've finished developing. We're hearing about 18-year-olds, and that's actually not your journey. You were a bit older, you were more mature. There was a different kind of pressure and a different kind of reasoning for you, but there was a real world benefit that you got at that time, right?
Yeah. I mean, my stepfather's a plastic surgeon and he did a lot of reconstructive surgeries. So breast implants were not his primary thing. He wasn't a cosmetic plastic surgeon. He did a lot of like facial reconstruction for scars and injuries and those kinds of things. Very talented. But I remember him talking about in the 80s, breast implants were massive, and especially among college kids. And I remember thinking that was mind blowing to me that college kids, you'd be at college and be like, I'm going to get breast implants. That seemed crazy to me because I think you're still developing and figuring out these things and so young and impressionable. So that seemed crazy to me. So I'm sitting, in a space of being over 30 and deciding to get this done. But what's so interesting is just this past weekend, I was with a group at a retreat and I'm in this circle of women and there were 8 of us. It was a spiritual retreat. And something that was really profound for me was I mentioned something about a surgery and I can't remember how it came up in the context of conversation, but it came up. And then someone asked me what I had done. And I said I had an explant surgery. I had my breast implants removed. And I could see everyone perk up. And this is what's happened since I've had this surgery is there's a lot of curiosity, especially among women. It's like this, wait, why? And so, and I have to be really careful because I never want anyone to feel like because of my experience and my choice to have my implants removed, I'm not judging women who choose to get them or who have them, because obviously I was them. I feel so strongly. I just want women to stop and think before they get them. I think if they haven't gotten them, and to really do more due diligence than I did to save them potentially from health risks and all these other things, or like the regret I had. And so we start talking about why I had the surgery, why I had the explant. And of the 8 women that were there, I believe 5 had had some type of breast procedure. So multiple had had breast implants. 1 had had a fat transfer. So instead of implants, she was very adamant she didn't want implants. So she had a fat transfer. Another one had a breast lift and a fat transfer as well after her children. And then, of course, me. So 5 out of 8 women in that circle had had some type of breast augmentation, which I was like, oh my gosh, this is crazy just from a percentage perspective. But the other women, the other 3 who had not, all 3 of them had thought about some type of augmentation. So the one who was really young was sharing that she was a cheerleader in high school and college, and during college had thought about it. And so circling back to what we were just talking about, thinking about in college, where she felt pressure to look a certain way and looking around at other people who were cheerleaders and athletes having larger breasts. But it hit me in that moment. And this was just a couple of days ago of like, oh my gosh, this is even more important to have this conversation, because the fact that those other 3 had all acknowledged that they thought about it. And one was like, I still think about it. And so it is on women's mind. And I think we don't realize how much, and so much of it, especially now with social media. I can only imagine now the amount of what people might feel as pressure, especially once you type that into your search engine. All of a sudden, the algorithm's going to start feeding you that. And now you're going to be like assaulted with that. It just, to me, being in this really sacred container and being able to have this conversation was just something that I knew I had to talk about today, because that's like 100% of women, feeling like they need some type of augmentation. I just thought that was kind of crazy. And I'd be interested to know what Australia is. But the number of plastic surgeons in the United States, there are 10,687 board certified plastic surgeons. So there are people doing surgical procedures, I'm sure, that are not board certified. And then when we talk about other countries, there are lots of people who aren't board certified surgeons that people go to because it's a lot cheaper to get these surgeries and procedures. It says there's about 7,700 actively practicing right now. But something for me that sticks out about this number, I wanted to know the actual factual data of how many were men, because I think this also feeds into this conversation, which I think we'll talk about. 81% are men. So what percentage do you think are women versus men getting plastic surgery?
Oh my gosh. Like 90% women, 10% men.
Close. 84% women.
Yeah.
So 84% of women are plastic surgery patients, with 81% being men. And men do get breast surgery. There are men who get breast surgery as well to get usually their breasts reduced, or some, I think they probably consider like if they get implants, like pectoral and muscular implants or something like that. But it's slim. It's like not even 10% from a breast augmentation perspective are men, or potentially, like I said, non-binary or anyone who might be trans and wanting to get surgery and get augmentation. But yeah, to me, that just speaks volume, especially when it comes to breast implants, which maybe that's something we talk about. I don't want to take over. You're hosting.
No, I think this is a really interesting conversation for so many reasons. And there's so much more to unpack. But how much of the time in those consults is spent talking to you to see your psychological state, your emotional state, and also just talk about like, what else have you tried?
Zero. Yeah. It's just kind of like, okay, why are you here? And okay, great. Well, get undressed and let's see what we're working with. I mean, that's like the conversation. And I don't know what others' experiences are, but I can tell you, especially even going in for my implants, what are you thinking? How big are you thinking? And then the biggest thing for me, and this is something that's a real problem, is the doctors, because most are male, mine was male, they are almost always convincing you of all the women that had breast procedures in that like small circle. So obviously it's only a circle of 8, but I have spoken to, I'm fairly confident over the years, well over a couple hundred women, because it just comes up talking about implants, literally hundreds of conversations about implants. Every single woman has told me they always try to get you to go bigger every time, every single time. And that was a big push with my surgeon, is they're like, you're going to want bigger. You're going to come back. And they try to sell you on, you're going to come back because you're going to want bigger. And one woman in this group did say she ended up going back and she ended up going bigger. The other ones, those of us that were in the group, one woman who was next to me said she was very adamant of like, no, this is the size I want. I know this is the size I want. I was the same way. I was like, absolutely not. Here's what I want, which I wanted a full C cup. That was my goal. And so I knew that, and I was afraid of him actually making them bigger without my consent.
Because that happens, right? I've heard of that happening
all the time. It happens. Wow. I would say probably 1 out of every 2 women. Because I've been in these groups, these support groups with women with implants, it's incredibly disturbing to me that these surgeons are making these decisions for women when they are unconscious and under anesthesia, and making a decision for our bodies that are going to change our bodies and affect how we exist in the world. Because some of these women end up with implants that are double the size that they wanted. And so it leads to back pain. It leads to just all kinds of pain, the recovery from that, because you're stretching your skin so far. All neck pain, have trouble, finding clothing that's appropriate. And then I think the shame around that too is, I think we give our power away to these people as experts. And so we're giving our power away and thinking they know better than we do for our own bodies. And really, it breaks my heart. Like, it makes me want to cry.
Heather.
Because I know I had that experience. And because I was so adamant and I was like, this is the size I want. And I remember, I don't know if I flat out said, like, you do not have permission to give me bigger, but it's like, I knew I had to vocalize that. And I think it's because the person who referred me to the surgeon, I want to say that was her experience, is she ended up getting a bit bigger than she anticipated. And I think she told herself she was okay with it. I don't know if she actually was, but I knew when I went in there, I was just adamant that this is the size I want. He showed them to me. Are you sure you don't want bigger? This is what it would look like. No, I don't want bigger. I mean, I had to convince him that I didn't want bigger implants. And I think a lot of women are very easily swayed when they're going in there. They're already not feeling good about themselves. And so they're giving their power to this expert, this person who's doing this, to say, well, everyone comes back. They always come back and want bigger. So we should just do bigger now. I don't even know why they do that. Like, what is... I don't know what they gain other than hearing complaints, I guess, allegedly, on the other side of like, oh, I could have gone bigger. It makes me really sad.
That sounds like such an insane power imbalance. And there's so much trust in your doctor, no matter what you're going to the doctor for. And so when that trust is taken advantage of, perhaps, and not given the adequate respect, that is really sad, because I don't have that many friends who've gone through these procedures, but just through the media and that kind of thing, and anecdotally people talking about their stories on podcasts and things like that, I've heard similar. And I've also heard about people being in situations where they didn't feel confident to actually state what they wanted, what they truly wanted, or what they thought was best for them in that dynamic with that doctor who held so much more power. And that's such a shame.
Yeah. And, just because I don't want any male listening that I'm just, down on men. It's like I said, that percentage of male plastic surgeons, because they dominate that industry, that's the experiences with men. But I will say in this group of 8 women, one woman did have a female surgeon and she had the same conversation.
Wow.
The female did say, you're probably going to want bigger. So that's not just a male thing, but also I do feel strongly that men are very much projecting what they think or what they want to see in women and in us. And I think that leads me, which I know we're going to talk about the risks and stuff, but that also to me, and part of my motivation for finally deciding to get this done was, it almost was like an FU to the patriarchy for me. It was like not only stepping into who I am authentically, but it also was like my love letter to the patriarchy of like, you're no longer going to have a say over my body. Like, I feel like I gave you that power. I allowed myself to have my self-worth judged by what I thought was beautiful in society, especially, well, probably just as much men as women, because, as women, we look at each other so often as competition. And so trying to one up each other or change our bodies so that we feel good among one another. But for me, it really was this, I don't want society to tell me what I need to look like. And this was almost a radical way of expressing that you will no longer have this hold on me to tell me what is beautiful and what's not. I wanted to share that, in that there was so much more behind my reason for getting them out. Health was a huge factor, but also for me, it was deciding that no longer would I allow a system to tell me how I needed to look in order to consider myself beautiful or complete or any of these things, which is what I went in on the other side of this, feeling I needed them to feel this way. I needed them to feel complete and whole and like fix something that God didn't give me in the first place.
Yeah. And I think that's such a powerful purpose of the spiritual journey as well, that at some point you say all the right things and you intellectualize these mantras around self-acceptance and love and authenticity and all of these things. But at some point you have to walk the walk. And sometimes it's really hard to do that. Like, it literally takes going under the knife. Going back to last year, in 2024, you mentioned when you were telling the story of your journey around feeling it was the right time to get your breast implants removed. I remember receiving messages from you around a particular podcast episode you heard with Mel Robbins, I think it was, that was pretty profound in the way it resonated with you, and that had led you to connect with a whole new community of people and start sharing experiences and learnings. And I would love for you to take the listeners through that whole thing, because it was really interesting to hear you share while you were going through that process. And it sounded like a really huge turning point for you as well.
Yeah. Before I listened to that podcast, I had definitely come to the decision it was time. Like, I was ready. I mentally, emotionally, like spiritually felt ready. And I started looking around for doctors in literally like Google searches. I think I had already found this doctor who was in Texas that I was, I know what it was. It was on the Heal with Kelly podcast. She had done her own explant episode, and that really got my wheels turning. That was probably the beginning of last year when she shared her explant journey. It might have even been before that. But then she had this doctor on who was talking about having a more holistic approach to explant surgery. And I was fascinated with that. And then I, like that weekend, listened to his audiobook. I started following him on social and taking all this information in. And I was like, talk about being influenced. I was totally influenced by this doctor and convinced like he's the one. Like, I have to go to this doctor. So listen to his book. I have the consultation scheduled. It was like, let's say it's a Wednesday. So Tuesday night, I am out doing errands and Mel Robbins' podcast on her Explant journey pops up. And I haven't listened to Mel Robbins' podcast ever. And so the fact this came into my feed, it pops up like as a notification, which to me, people can say it's the algorithms and all these things. We know, Natalie and I, meaning we, that our spirit guides and the universe can very easily manipulate technology. It's a very easy way for them to put things in front of us through songs, through things popping up on our phone all of a sudden.
Through them shutting down stuff on your phone when you're not supposed to do something.
Yep.
They've got their own algorithm.
Yeah. They have their own thing. And so we know, and if you listen to any famous mediums and stuff, they will tell you that's one of the easiest ways that our spirit guides communicate with us is through technology because it's electric, it's energy that they can easily manipulate. It's one of the easiest things they can do.
It's in the unseen realms, just like they are.
Yeah, exactly. And so this pops up on my feed and I'm like, I have to listen to this. Wow. Like I want to hear about her journey. And it literally blew open a whole nother side of this whole equation of wanting to go down this path of my explant journey. And yeah, it was like, picture the head exploding emoji. That was me listening to this, like the whole episode. It was like an hour and she's talking about her journey. And I felt so seen and heard by listening to her talk because one of the things she talks about is her surgical experience where she went in and kind of all the things we talked about where she was very adamant. She wanted little baseball boobs. She called hers like they were tube socks filled with liquid hanging down. That's what she felt her breasts looked like after her children. And so she ended up going to a plastic surgeon and she came out with like D or double D size boobs.
Yeah.
And this to me was shocking because I'm like, this is a celebrity. This is someone who is out there, who has a lot of influence in the public sphere. And also, I think she's a lawyer by trade and also like has the wherewithal and resources to sue. And that just made me think when she started talking about the fact that she got double what she went in for, the fact that a doctor would have the audacity to do that with someone because of all those reasons I just named, thinking like, how could you not sue the heck out of them? Like, it's crazy. Obviously, in the paperwork that you sign, that of course none of us read going into surgeries when it's like pages and pages, I'm sure it says in there you are giving some kind of deference to the surgeon to make some kind of change if they deem necessary. Which I think if you are going to get implants, make sure you read everything and or even make them insert a clause that they cannot change the size that you agree to and initial that and all those things, because I feel like this is a big problem. So she starts talking about the repercussions of that on her body, the shame that she woke up and she just wanted these small breasts. She didn't want anyone to know she had them. She wanted it to be indiscernible for anyone to look at her and know that she had gotten implants.
Right.
And now all of a sudden, here she is with more than double the size of what she was. And like the repercussions for her, I mean, listening to her describe going to buy clothes, like she was filled with shame all the time. She was mortified, basically, that she had these big boobs when she is later in life and just wanted this, I want to feel better about myself, which is the intention she went in with. And now she's walking out with something she didn't want. And so that was the first part of like, oh my gosh, this does happen to so many women. And I'm grateful it wasn't my experience, but I've heard it from so many women. And then having this woman who is this well-known in the public eye talk about this was like, yes, like, oh my gosh, thank you for this. But then she went on to talk about how she felt with them. And then one of the things that was the most profound part was, as you mentioned, how I actually found my doctor from her podcast, the doctor I ultimately went with. So she's living with these things and so unhappy. She's actually depressed and having some other symptoms of not being well, which we'll talk about. And so she happened to be in an airport in like passing a friend. And Mel said, where are you going? And she said, I'm actually going to Cleveland. I'm getting breast implants removed. And she was like, what? And I think this woman said, yeah, I didn't realize how sick they were making me. And I am a part of these Facebook groups. And so she gave Mel Robbins the information about the breast implant illness groups on Facebook. And then Mel Robbins proceeded that night she said she went to her hotel room and she was up all night reading posts from women about how sick they are and how many women had the same experience she had, that they had gone in asking for one size and ended up with double or sometimes even bigger, which is just mind-boggling. And then also the symptoms with breast implant illness. So it pointed me, which I'll talk about, pointed me in the direction of knowing that there were these support groups. So I literally paused the podcast and I was like, let me see if I can find this support group. And as soon as you put breast implant illness in like a Facebook search, all these groups come up. And I chose 2 to join. And as soon as I had access, same thing. I started reading these stories and they're heartbreaking. What women have experienced, what we've gone through. So then she goes to talk about her experience of getting her explant surgery. So I think she had her implants for like a year and a half. It was short. And she also talked about the shame of like making a mistake of getting these implants, paying for the surgery, going through that recovery, and now having to go say, okay, now I want them out, which I think is a whole nother thing. Because I think a lot of women realize quickly they don't feel well, they're sick, they realize it's not what they want. But now almost the embarrassment and shame that comes from saying, I made a mistake, I want to have them out. That's like a whole nother load of baggage that we carry with us.
Yeah.
And there's a theme here. We're carrying a lot of baggage. And so she talks about that too, of how she had to get over this and decide, I want to take these out. They're not what I want. And so she ends up finding this doctor. Her name's Dr. Lugene Fang in Cleveland. And she talked about the experience with her explant. And it was so beautiful. And I was like, I want that. Like, I want this experience. Like, this sounds amazing. And I literally the next day have my consultation with this other doctor that in my mind, I had already told myself this was the doctor I was going to go to because it was more holistic. So she talked about this whole experience and how Dr. Fang was this expert in pioneering implant removal. She makes sure that all of the materials removed. That's very important. And just the experience of being there, of being seen and heard and cared for just resonated so deeply. And I was like, yes, that's what I want. And maybe I shouldn't just rush and only talk to one doctor and decide this is what I want to do. So I finished the episode and I might have left you a message after that episode because I was like, oh my gosh, this was like everything that I needed to hear about validation for my own experience in that podcast episode, but also how on the other side of it, like hearing Mel Robbins and her gratitude and feeling still whole and complete, that was like what I wanted. That's what I was reaching for.
Yeah.
And I thought it's within reach. It made it even more of a motivating factor of, yeah, I'm doing the right thing. It was confirmation. So I joined these 2 breast implant illness groups on Facebook. I'm reading all these women's stories and people are putting posts up asking for recommendations in certain geographies. So I had posted something asking for recommendations. I said, I'm having a consult with this doctor in Texas. I've seen other people mention Dr. Fang. I'd love to know if anyone's had experiences with either doctor. If you could message me privately. And so I'm literally in the waiting room waiting for this Texas-based doctor to get on the consult. And while I was in that waiting room, I get a private message from a woman who tells me that she had an explant and she said, I use Dr. Fang. I highly recommend you at least get a consult with her. It will be a tremendous experience for you. And she shared that when they remove breast implants, you have to make sure they remove the capsules and all the material because your breast implants, your body's response to this object, because it is a foreign toxic object that is now being put into your body. Your body's response is to, of course, mobilize and get it out. and it can't push it out. And so it creates like this capsule around it to protect your body. Your body is so incredibly intelligent, and it's doing the thing it thinks it can do to protect you. But apparently what happens with a lot of women, and I was very lucky, this was not my story, is material does break off of the implants, especially as they age. And with a lot of women, especially if they had implants a long time ago and they're still in their body, is it gets embedded in your chest wall. And think about it, your chest, the other side of that is your heart. So you have a surgeon who's potentially plucking foreign material, silicone or, whatever the implant's made out of your chest wall. Yeah. Mine were completely intact. My capsules, everything came out intact. There was no material left behind. So I was very lucky. But this woman talked about her surgery, which I think she said, the surgery is normally like 2.5 hours. And I think hers was like 4.5 hours or something like that.
Wow.
Because she had to go in there and she told her, I will not close you up without everything being out. Because if there's any material left, you will still have breast implant illness symptoms. You will still have whatever you're feeling. You still have foreign material. So I will get everything out. And so I was talking to this doctor about that, and I wasn't feeling great about it. I didn't resonate from an energetic perspective. And so I had hung up, and I immediately reached out to Dr. Fang's office and was able to get someone and schedule a consultation. And I remember I spoke to one of the women there, and she asked me some questions, and they were so thoughtful. And I was like, no one's ever asked me any of these things. And it started with that whole patient experience, which I didn't even realize there was like a patient experience in really anything, because we don't think about it. We're treated one way when we go to the doctors, and we just accept that's how it should be. And until we have a better experience, we don't know how something should be or that it could be better. And from the beginning, from the greeting of them answering the phone and asking questions, I felt cared for already. And so it just led me on this other path, from Mel Robbins' podcast to even this experience with having this woman who I consider an angel reaching out to me from a timing perspective right before I spoke to this doctor, that this woman saw my message and reached out to me to share her story with me, to prepare me better, to ask better questions during my consult with the other doctor. To me was, again, divine intervention coming my way, that everything aligned, that we could connect so quickly. And I remember hanging up thinking like, wow, thank you to my angels and guides who are looking out for me, because I feel like I just dodged like a really big bullet.
I feel like too, when this stuff happens in our journey at these really important times, it's almost like angels are here in real life interacting with us. Yep. That angel that gave you that advice, like while you're literally in the waiting room, even Mel Robbins' own friend happening to see her at the airport, literally flying somewhere, having an like angelic intervention in real life. It's very powerful.
Yeah. I feel like there were so many points along the way where there was so much intervention, but if we're not looking for it, or we don't stop for a moment to think about the magic and the help that's all around us, we will miss it 100%. And we can chalk things up to coincidence or whatever. Replace coincidence with synchronicity. There is synchronicity, and there are so many people, so many energetic beings out there that are trying to help us every day. And they do help us, and we just don't realize. So, very long story short, I ended up going with Dr. Fang. I just felt very much in alignment with what I was looking for. And even Dr. Fang, I spoke to about this other doctor, and she said, I respect him as a colleague and what he's doing in this space. And he's helping a lot of women heal. And I really appreciated that she wasn't looking to tear someone down or say it wasn't the right thing. She's like, we're both doing research to shine a light on breast implant illness for women and how it affects women. And she was very complimentary. And I really respected that even more about her as a surgeon and even just a human being. But I decided to go with Dr. Fang, and I realized like, I can drive there. It was in Cleveland, so we could drive. We didn't have to take a plane. I didn't have to worry about dealing with all that. I was able to get an Airbnb, which that lined up really magically. We ended up being in this beautiful little town called Chagrin Falls. It was like magic from my childhood. It snowed every day. We were in this beautiful, cozy house. The Airbnb host couldn't have been more gracious. She herself was an angel. And so she had someone come in, like, it said that we were responsible for clearing the driveway and the sidewalk or whatever, but everything was shoveled when we woke up in the morning.
Oh.
Like someone came, she must have said, this person's having surgery. Like, can you help them out? Everything was always cleared every morning when we would leave to go back to the surgical center. And so I believe like that too. I mean, it was just the most beautiful place to heal in. It just was like magic, magic, magic. So I feel like I set myself up for magic on this course to get this surgery and this journey, and I didn't even know it.
I remember too from that time, because it was such a contrast where you're going through this recovery from a serious surgery and also having to reckon with all of the feelings that come along with that around your own feelings about your body and whether you're going to have acceptance and love for your new body. But at the same time, you were in this wonderful place where you had this beautiful time with your mum, where that was a blessing and a gift as well.
I did. Yeah. So like I said, booked the Airbnb. My mom was like, of course I'm going to come with you. So she and I headed out to Cleveland, to this little suburb where the surgical facility is. And from the moment we got to the house, it felt so right. And then we show up the next morning for my pre-op. And so when I was talking about how much time, I was in with Dr. Fang for 2 hours for my pre-op. I've never had a doctor spend so much time with me. I've never had someone ask such thoughtful questions. I mean, she went through every line item. So she's probably the only doctor who's ever done that. I mean, just the experience, and I didn't realize this at the time. My mom read this while we were there, but it's like a Ritz-Carlton model of service, which is this service of excellence, but also this service of, it's not everyone else's, like, you don't just have your job, it's everyone's job to care for the patients, for the clients coming in. And you could feel it when you walked in. From the second they greeted you, they come down to get you the first time because you don't know where you're going, and bring you up and show you the facility. And just right away, it was like this warm hug, and everyone was so welcoming. And I am very privileged that I was able to go see Dr. Fang, to be able to afford to use her to have my explant. I see women on here talking about, I just paid all this money for the implants. I don't have money to take them out, but I know they're making me sick. Like, what can I do? My heart breaks for these women because they obviously are suffering. They're suffering. And also most people don't believe them. And I think that's the other thing, is that they're not believed, where it's like, no, you're just sick, or you don't want to change this habit, and so blame it on this. And it is a real thing. Breast implant illness is a real thing, and it encapsulates so much. And there's so much research being done. So Dr. Fang is doing a lot of research. This other doctor that I mentioned is doing a lot of research and gathering data from patients and doing surveys and collecting information, how they've changed and how they've recovered from surgery, what symptoms have gone away. I certainly feel more life force in me, which is kind of a weird thing, but just feeling, I felt as soon as I had them out, it felt like this returning back to myself, and like, there I am. Like, I almost was not myself by having these devices, because they're a medical device, in my body. It was like, oh my gosh, I'm back to wholeness. Like, I'm back to who I am, which a lot of people, there are women who really struggle too with their new body shape and size. And again, there's a whole self-love journey on the other side of this, of accepting yourself and knowing you're going to have, small breasts now, and your bathing suits and your clothes are going to fit differently, and you have to adjust to that. And it can be really traumatic. It was not for me. And a lot of people ask me, like, do you have regrets, or do you miss them? And I'm like, absolutely not. When I decided I was doing this, I was counting down the days. And now I'm like, oh, I don't hit my boobs when I work out. Like, they're not hitting the sides of my arms, and I don't have to worry about wearing tighter sports bras, and, so many things. But, this journey with my mom and being cared for. So I already talked a little bit about being cared for at the actual surgical facility, to the point that, like, I cried when I left. Like, I was so sad to leave. I mean, of course I wanted to come home to my family, but I have never felt so cared for in my life by the medical establishment. I wanted to, like, capture it. I wanted to put it in a bottle. It just the whole experience there, from every nurse to the care at the facility, and really the presence. One thing I know that we talked about a lot was Dr. Fang has this presence. She's this small, petite woman. I think she's like 5'4", but gosh, she has presence. Like she is commanding, not in an authoritative way, but in a loving, confident, I've got you and you're going to be okay way. And having someone who's in that position of authority that potentially could be almost like use their power for not good, she uses it for good to really help women feel loved and cared for and seen. And that was the biggest thing for me, was feeling seen. Was she gave me those hours in pre-op, to learn about me, to tell me everything about the surgery, to answer every question, sometimes multiple times. Post-op, I saw her. She came in to tell me how well the surgery went, got everything out, repaired everything. She said everything was beautiful. I did not get a lift. A lot of women get lifts when they get them out. She'll take the skin and kind of pull it up and whatever. There is another scar with that, and it's a little bit longer. You have to have the drains in another day or two. I did not want that. I just wanted them out, and I just wanted to be back to however it played out. I didn't have a lift. She was really happy with how everything looked. She's like, we call it the poor man's lift, where you don't really get a lift, but she does what she can to kind of move the breast tissue around and stuff to, obviously look symmetrical and have everything look good. Working with this doctor in particular, most of her patients, because I'm in one of her support groups specifically for her patients, say they have like no pain.
Wow.
The way she handles recovery, the way she inserts blockers so that you basically have virtually no pain. So when I woke up, I was a little groggy, but not sick. There were no narcotics. I felt great. Like I couldn't believe it. And then, so she came out and talked to me. She came into the recovery room again when my mom came back and talked to me again and basically answered the same questions, because I remember asking her the questions, but I couldn't remember the answer. And then the next day she went over all of it again because I asked again. And every single time, even to the time that she removed my drains and was getting me ready to go home, anytime I was asking her a question, she stopped what she was doing and gave me her full attention and looked at me, right at me in my eyes. And I realized I don't know how many people have ever done that in my life.
Wow.
And I would wonder for a lot of us, people listening, if you've had that experience where someone stops what they're doing, especially this day and age where they're talking while they're on the phone, looking at something or doing something. I mean, I do it all the time. And having that presence, having someone give you their full attention, feeling, again, that feeling of being seen, it is a gift. It is a gift you can give to someone. It is a gift I try to give my kids and other people in my life when I can. And I fully admit I fall off the wagon and I become the multitasker and I get sucked into stuff and not being present or giving people that presence. But I can tell you, it is a gift that I didn't know I needed until I got it. And then it's like something that you don't want to live without again, is having that presence from someone. And it doesn't cost anything. It's not even a lot of time because you're probably already having the conversation, but giving someone your full presence, that was one of the biggest lessons I learned from this surgery, was that you can give that to someone. And what an incredible gift of love that is for someone to receive that, to feel seen and feel heard and just have your presence, even if it's for 5 minutes, even if it's for 3 minutes while you're answering a question. That full presence, it's like you feel it with your body. You can see it with their body. And Dr. Fang embodied that for me. And I can still picture our interaction where it's like a bolt of lightning hit me. And it was like, I've never felt so seen before and heard and not made to feel less than or that I was crazy, and that they were happy to, she was happy to answer my questions in a kind and loving way. So, yeah. And then I had this, I had the experience with my mom where we had time together. She took care of me. We played games. We ate beautiful food. It's weird to say, it's almost like it was a little vacation for us, even though I had surgery, but we had such a beautiful time. And it was a reminder for me as an adult at 48 years old that we still need to be cared for. I'm used to being the caregiver to so many in my life, and I forget that I need to be cared for. And this, for that moment for me, was a moment in time that I had to ask for help, which was a really big lesson, and that I deserve to be cared for too. And it's not just me taking care of myself, but I'm allowed to ask and have others care for me. And I can receive that without guilt and feeling like I have to turn around and pay it back in some way, or that I have to do something or I have to earn it. It's just, we all deserve love and to be cared for. And this experience just magnified that for me and gave that to me in such a beautiful, beautiful way that I just was beyond grateful for.
Oh, that's so powerful. It's so beautiful. And as you were telling the story of Dr. Fang's presence and how you felt seen, I saw you as a child. And, because when we're in such a vulnerable state, like after being operated on and also having to come to terms with waking up as your renewed self, it is a really vulnerable position to be in, almost like when we're a child and we've got no option but to be cared for. And we can only hope and pray that the person in that position is going to give us that presence. And it's so rare, as you said, especially with the medical system. And it made me really think, wow, it almost seems like a futuristic form of care in that every single doctor has the potential to be that for their patient. And it's such a sad, sad system we have where she's an outlier, she's an anomaly and a beautiful, angelic anomaly. But yeah, I'm so grateful to her for giving you that amazing gift. And I know some of those lessons were really profound for you. So I want to touch on those before we close out, around lessons to do with your own body and your self-acceptance and closing of the loop of that journey that you were on around augmenting your body and then coming back to yourself to find that wholeness. Yeah. What does that feel like now, and what were the takeaways for you?
Yeah, I think for me, every day is a journey. I'm not going to lie. I was worried about bathing suits. I kept thinking about bathing suits and like, what is this going to look like? And how am I going to be in a bathing suit? Because I think that's one of the things women always, either you're worried about cellulite or your boobs in a bathing suit, or your stomach, I guess, probably those three areas. One of the things I thought about right away is like, oh, I like my bathing suits and now I'm not going to be able to wear them. And it's so funny what we think about in our mind. Fast forward, it's summer. And I thought I was going to have to go buy all these new bathing suits. I bought one, but all my bathing suits are fine. Like I just tie them tighter and they're totally fine. And I love my body in them. I'm like, I feel like they fit me better being smaller. So it's interesting how you're worried about something and on the other side, it actually feels better. But coming back to myself, every night I do a gratitude practice before I go to bed. I put my hand on my heart and I lay there. And one of the first thoughts is like, oh, I don't have big boobs anymore. And it's like 6 months later. I just passed the 6-month mark a couple days ago. And it's funny that thought still comes in my head. I think I'm still deprogramming myself. I'm still unwinding what was, because I had these implants for 15 years. And so there's still this time that even though I look at my body and I'm every day, like when I get out of the shower, I just tell myself I love myself and I'm so happy. I have not had one moment of regret. I know a lot of women really struggle. So I have a lot of empathy, and I also feel very lucky how my surgery turned out. I know a lot of women talk about feeling deformed or they're almost ashamed, which makes me really sad of how they look. And I don't know if I asked 20 people to look at my boobs, if they would be like, oh yeah, they look great. It doesn't matter. I love them. I think I'm beautiful. And I feel like I would feel that way no matter what, because I realized the value of my health. And there were so many other reasons that I did this. It didn't have to do with my physical appearance. It was everything but that. And so the physical appearance to me is a bonus of, I actually love how I look and I'm really happy and adjusting. But it's still an adjustment. And actually they talk about, that's one of the things too, women talk about being able to take deeper breaths, not having these heavy things on their chest. And I think about that of like breath and how incredibly important it is, and having this life force within us and having it potentially compressed by heavy breasts and implants. And I know there's women who just naturally have really big breasts and might feel that way too and might struggle. But I think having these devices inside of you that we've chosen to put inside of us that might compress our breath, it's our life force. And so I'm so grateful to be able to breathe deeper. And I think the acceptance of my body, starting with having my implants out, has really carried itself through to the rest of my body, because I've been very hard on my body in terms of not being kind to it. And this forced me to look at myself differently and really flip everything on its head that I've said for most of my life and embrace and love my body. And while I think it will still be a journey of acceptance, I'm not 100% there, but I can say most days I'm very grateful for how I look and what I have and the ability to even have had the surgery. I still am grateful and acknowledge that regularly, to have been able to go through this and come out the other side and in a place of wholeness and wellness and feel good about that. And also have had the support, my husband, my family, my kids, my sister, my friend, Marianne, my Reiki teacher. Like, I feel like I had so much support around me. And I know so many people who don't have that, where they don't have their support, especially of their spouse, where their spouse might not want them to get them out. My husband was very supportive. As I said, he was the one pushing for me to get them out 5 years ago. And women ask me, it's one of the first questions they ask me is like, oh, what does your husband think? What does that say? That we're so worried about our spouses because they're used to seeing us a certain way. And in this societal norm, again, I almost want to be like, what do you mean? But I don't say that. I'm like, my husband was very supportive. He was the one who actually really was kind of the instigator, I would say, of me having the surgery. And so I think, all those lessons of being cared for, of coming back to ourselves and realizing how powerful we are. And it's all what we tell ourselves. When I look in the mirror, what message am I giving to myself? What message are you giving to yourself? And we have the power to change how we see ourselves. We have to believe it ourselves first. And this helped me to do that. And 15 years ago, getting implants helped me when looking in the mirror to feel better about myself. That's what I needed at that time. And I love myself in that space too. And I'm grateful to be kind of past that chapter, but it's a journey. And I feel like it's going to continue to unfold. I feel like I'm still learning lessons, even just lessons of support and empathy of others who are going through this. I try not to go into the support group too much because you can really get caught up in people's fear. There's a lot of fear and a lot of it is desperation. And again, I feel for these women. And so I try my best really just to send a lot of love to those groups and, let women know that they're going to be okay as much as I can. And really, I want to share this message about breast implants and that there is breast implant illness. And if you're not well and you have implants, or maybe there's things that are in the back of your mind like me, where it's kind of like, oh, I have this weird thing here and there, and you kind of chalk it up to whatever, you blow it off, there's probably something to it. And I would encourage you to explore that, or at least just take some time to sit with it and figure out if getting an explant or something else is a part of your journey. So
I want to ask as well, before we wrap up, for women, let's say, or anyone who might be suffering from the illness side of things and know that there's something wrong, but might not be as progressed on the journey of acceptance and has such great fear around, who am I going to be? These are part of my identity. Who's going to love me, or how am I going to love myself once they're gone? Do you have any advice for people at that stage of the journey?
It's all part of the healing journey. If you can find someone just to believe in you, to help bolster your own spirit, because I know sometimes it can be hard to get ourselves to that place on our own, to feel like we can do this on our own. It's hard. And I would encourage, if there's someone that you can reach out to, if it's in the support groups, there's so much support and love there, and you will find it. It's beautiful. I see, women post their post-surgery pictures and share, I see all the beautiful comments, and it's so uplifting. But I think if you're not there, just start with trying really hard, even if it's for 10 seconds or, a minute while you're brushing your teeth, to just tell yourself you love yourself or that you're beautiful. And you might not believe it at first, but just do it and keep doing it, because it's in there. Like, that part of you that loves yourself is in there. It might be buried a little bit, might be buried under all these things that we've been told. It might be buried under all these programs and messages and all those things. But I promise you it's in there, because we don't come into this life, into this body, hating ourselves. We just don't. we come in loving ourselves, and we're taught not to love ourselves. And so if you can claw your way back, if you can find radical love for yourself, despite anything else that you're being told, especially if you have someone who is not supportive, who is potentially even emotionally abusive, that is telling you the opposite, it's not true. You have to choose to believe that. You can make a different choice. You can choose not to believe that. That is their own reflection of their own pain and how they see themselves. That is not a reflection of you. And so know that you are loved, and that there are so many, even if it's energetic beings, as Natalie said, whether it's ancestors or spirit guides or angels, you're so loved in so many ways. And while sometimes we might find it hard to find a physical person in this moment to love us, I promise there's one. And I also promise, if you ask for help and you ask for that love to be shown to you, you will find it. And you have to be eyes wide open, open your heart to receive that. I think that's the hardest thing. But if you can open yourself up to receive that love, and on the other side, if I can give that to someone, I hope people receive that. You're loved. I love you. This has been a journey for me, but if you can start, every day, every morning when I'm brushing my teeth, I have a 2-minute timer. I do my affirmations, and one of them at the end is I am love and I am loved. So I know that I am love. I can give myself that love, but I also know that I'm loved, whether that's from myself, my higher self, beings around me, community, loved ones. I think that's where the journey starts, is with ourselves. And maybe you pick up a pen and you just write that to yourself. You write a love letter to yourself. And that's where you start, and you start building that self-love. We all deserve health and vitality, and we deserve to be seen and heard and to be believed. And so if you're feeling sick, if you're feeling like something's wrong, chances are that's your intuition telling you that something is going on. And I implore you to listen to that. Even if it's just a whisper right now, it might turn into a roar by the time you really start to listen and open yourself up.
That's really beautiful advice. Thank you, Heather. Thank you for sharing your journey and your story. It's going to help lots of people. I know that.
Yeah, thank you. And thank you for holding space for this. I know you really wanted to honor my story and everything I have learned and hold this sacred container for this conversation. So I'm grateful to have done this with you and not have just kind of recorded into the void on my own to share my experiences, because it wouldn't have been the same. And I thank you for all the beautiful questions. And I'm very hopeful that it will help a lot of people out there who might be struggling, whether it's with self-love or if it's specific to breast implants or breast implant illness, or you've gone through an explant. I would love to hear from you and your story and how you've healed, or if you have a practice or something that worked for you, please tell us. Please write in. You can go to our website, which is becomingspiritual.me. Natalie will post show notes and have a link to the website. You can post a comment there or leave one with the podcast. We would love, love, love to hear from you. And if even this conversation was impactful to you, maybe you share it with someone that you love, that you know could be either suffering from breast implant illness or is struggling, or you think it might just touch them. I hope it's received with a lot of love. And this is not coming from a place of fear or judgment. Our intention is purely to share for loving purposes and to let you know that you are loved too.
Absolutely. Empowerment all the way. Heather, you shared so many amazing resources, so I'm going to make sure they're all listed in the show notes. And we've also recently launched a resources page on the becomingspiritual.me website. So there'll be a whole section around this episode and the topics we've discussed that you'll be able to go and find all the resources, whether that's the support group links or the podcast episodes that you listen to, or even information about Dr. Fang.
Yeah. You are a powerful creator, and you can create whatever it is you need for yourself. So just believe that, because that's what we're here to do.
Yeah. And I know for a fact that the other episodes exploring all the different modalities will also help you in this holistic journey of healing and transformation and radical self-love and self-acceptance. So there's going to be more amazing content in the upcoming episodes to help you with that journey too.
Yes. Thanks, Natalie.
Thank you, Heather.
Grateful. Thank you, everyone, for receiving this with love. We love you.
We love you. Until next time. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you so much for taking time out of your precious day to listen to our podcast. If this episode resonated with you, we would love for you to share it with someone you love. That would mean the world to us. Also, if you feel called, please follow our show so you will know when a new episode drops. If you want to go one step further, you can even rate this episode, as it allows our podcast to find its way to others. Lastly, we've done our best to share resources that you might find helpful in the show notes, whether that's a book recommendation or a website we referenced during the episode, a free resource, or more information on a guest who took their time to speak with us and share their knowledge. We would love for you to support their work too. You can find more information on our podcast website at becomingspiritual.me. We love you and can't wait for you to hear the next episode. Until then, know you have a place where you are welcome and you are loved. Welcome home.